Hi everyone. So here we go. We're moving even deeper into the writing process, and today what I wanted to cover are the three main ways you can connect with your readers. You may have heard of these appeals: ethos, logos, pathos, but I want to make sure by the end of this brief presentation that you have a solid sense of what each one entails so that you can begin to be more conscious of how you're employing them in your own writing to really shake up your readers, get them to pay attention, get them convinced, and make them feel moved by your writing. So let's jump right in with the first main appeal here: ethos. So think about this as those ethical appeals, how you are building credibility and making your readers feel like they're in good hands, like they can trust you. We've all experienced this as readers or viewers when we're listening to a speech on TV, or we open a web page and read an article. We have a quick way of kind of identifying, hey, do I feel like this person is trustworthy? Do I feel like I'm in good hands? Well, guess what? It's the same thing now with you as a writer, with an audience that will be reading your work. You want to make sure that they have that same experience where they can rest assured that from start to finish, they feel like you have done your work, you have good judgment, and you're really somebody that they can trust and feel good about spending time reading the entire work. So a quick kind of check before you jump in and get too deep into your work, or this is also a good set of questions you can ask during the revision process after the work has kind of sat for a while and it's gotten cold. Are you fair and balanced? Especially this is true when it comes to research argumentative papers. Are you researching with the blinders on? Or are you only looking for sources that really tie to your main point that you're trying to make? If so, your readers will smell that out, right? They'll know that, hey, this is not a fair and balanced paper. And it kind of ties back to what we talked about last week with tone. This writer seems too heated. This writer seems too angry or dismissive when it comes to the other side or other sides of the debate. I don't feel like I can trust this writer based on how he or she sounds on the page. I also don't know if they've done their work as a researcher. And that brings us to the second question. Have you really gone in and looked for sources that look at the topic through a wide array of lenses? Again, don't research with the blinders on. Don't just focus on that one little island that you're trying to prove, but how many voices can you bring into your work to really give your writers, or rather your readers, a sense of the larger conversation, and to show them on the page that you've really rolled up your sleeves as a researcher. You've done your work. That's a great way to boost your credibility, in addition to showing that you're fair and balanced and that you have a cool, neutral tone for the most part, or respectful tone. Yes, you might be trying to prove a point, but you're respectful of the other side. You're balanced and you're showing what the other side thinks. I think that's a great way to boost your credibility. And the third point I put up here is, do you have a strong connection to your topic? This is an excellent way for your readers to feel like you have a right to enter the conversation. If you're writing about a topic that you've never heard of before, or you really don't care about, that's going to come through on the page. Trust me, you've probably experienced it, right? If you get an assignment and it says, hey, you have to write about X, and you don't want to write about that topic, it's really hard to get excited about it. It's really hard to do the research the way you need to. It's really hard to sound enthusiastic and thoughtful on the page. So make sure when you're writing at a college level that, yeah, I do have a strong connection to this. And even if I don't, when it comes to work or personal, maybe it's just something I'm fired up about because I want to learn more about it. That's always a good start. So what's your connection to the topic, and can you show your readers that you're passionate about it and that you really have a respect for the topic and an eagerness to dive in fully? So these are great ways to boost your credibility on the page. And remember, not just people out there on videos and professional writers. This is something that you'll have to be cognizant as a college level writer. How do you boost that credibility? And hopefully these three questions can kind of give you a sense of how to be more conscious of that when you get deeper into the writing. So ethos, now we'll move on to pathos. This is probably, I think, the most natural way for student writers, writers of all kind really, to connect with readers, the emotional connection. We've seen this in commercials. You know those Humane Society commercials with Sarah McLachlan and the sad music and the little puppies behind the cages? Well, that's pathos in action. That's really targeting certain emotions to get us moved, to make some action, to donate, to adopt that dog. We see it in a lot of different political commercials as well. But we also need to keep in mind that we have to be able to do this as writers. We have to connect with our writers, or rather our readers, emotionally, for them to feel moved by our work and for them to understand why we feel our solutions are necessary. So some good ways to connect with them, that emotional connection, and to establish it through your work is, what stories are you weaving in? You may have a great topic, but if you're only focused on the numbers and stats and you're not putting a human face to the issue, your readers will feel like the writing's very sterile and very flat. So what stories, some human stories, are you weaving in to make the issue come alive and to put a human face to the topic so that your readers kind of see, hey, this is affecting real people on the ground level, and I feel like I can connect with these people. I feel like I'm more invested in the topic and more interested in the writing. When it comes to those stories, my second question up here is, well, what emotions do you want your readers to feel? I think this is a good zoomed out question to ask. Okay, I have this story in my writing. What am I trying to get my readers to feel, and am I doing it? This would also be a good question to kind of bounce back to those peer readers or those family members that you have check your work. Do you feel a certain way of this story, or do you feel like I should maybe switch it or tweak it a bit because I'm really trying to get my reader to fill in the blank? Back to those Humane Society commercials, I'd say it's safe to say they created those with the intent of making us feel empathetic, a little guilty, sad. All those emotions kind of stir up inside of us when we watch those, but because of that, we're more likely to take action. So that's what we want to keep in mind when it comes to our own writing, or the emotions that we're targeting and how we're doing it through our stories that we're weaving in. How are we creating those stories to make our readers feel something? And then what bridges are you building between you and your readers? Sometimes this can be done through humor. Sometimes this can be done through just showing them that you understand where they're coming from, that you really understand all sides of the issue. You'll see that these appeals generally, they connect, they tie into each other. So how can you connect with your readers to show them that they're in a good place, that they can trust you, and that you understand, what they're thinking when it comes to the topic, or what they might be thinking, and that you're not just trying to manipulate them? That's a good way to make them feel trust. That's also it feels good to read your writing when you encounter a writer that way. So stories, what emotions are those stories targeting, and are you doing it well? Do those stories need to be tweaked in some way? And now we move on to logos. So now we're moving on from the heart to the brain to win readers over. So if you want to think about pathos as really trying to connect with readers with the heart, I want to make them feel a certain emotion here in the paper with this story. Now, logical connection, think about the light bulb going off in the reader's brain. This is different, right? We'll do this mostly with facts and stats and those hard numbers. We need to be careful, though, that those facts and stats and hard numbers are coming from credible places. We also need to be careful that we're not overdoing it. I think the temptation is, with our early drafts, to load our argumentative-based papers with a lot of stats and numbers. But there's a risk that you run as a writer when you do this. Your readers are going to tune out. It feels very dull. It feels very dry. So that's why we have to make sure we're using all three of these appeals. Am I connecting with readers with stories and also balancing out with these facts and stats and hard numbers? We can also bring in credible authorities. It's always a good idea, I think, to bring in other voices, quotations, or paraphrase moments from credible outside authorities to show that, hey, I'm not the only voice here. I've done my work as a researcher, and it will get the light bulb to kind of click on. Oh, wow, this person thinks this about this topic. Makes it sound more convincing. So again, use those selectively. We want to make sure that we have a very strong filter and we're only bringing in the best, most trustworthy authorities, and that we're using the words sparingly, but really effectively throughout the paper. We want to make sure that they're placed in good spots and that we're not overdoing it, just like we're not overdoing it with facts and stats. And then you'll see that there's an overlap here between pathos. Just like when we're trying to connect with readers emotionally, I think relevant stories and narratives can also help that light bulb to go off as well. If you are talking about homelessness, for example, let's just say that that's the topic, you're only going to move readers and get them to be convinced about your ideas around the topic. If you convince them with just facts and stats, that's only going to work so much. At some point, you're going to have to drop down to the ground level and start to paint the picture of what it's like in the day of a homeless person, what it's like inside of a food bank or a shelter, to really help your readers understand the reality of the situation, why you feel your ideas are justified. So ethos, logos, pathos, here we go, weaving in all three. That's the big part I want you to keep in mind here, is you don't want to lean too heavily on one appeal. You might be one of those writers that it's very easy for you to write stories that connect with readers emotionally, but you kind of left out the other parts, showing that you have a personal connection to the topic or a real interest in it, showing that you have good judgment, or maybe you're just forgot about all that research that you need to include. That's going to damage your paper, just like it would if you load your paper up with too many numbers and stats. You also want to make sure your work is connecting with readers in a balanced way from start to finish. You may have a good balance in the beginning. You're very aware, hey, you know what? I got to balance these numbers out with a story here. But then all of that balance seems to fall off as the writing goes on. That's not a good thing either. You want to make sure that with a longer paper, which you'll inevitably have to complete as a college level writer, that these appeals are consistently balanced from start to finish. And again, this is deeper writing process issues. You have to have a good draft to figure out if that's happening. So now we're deeper, and these are the big questions to keep in mind. And then here at the bottom, I put up here, if you are employing mostly one appeal in your writing, well then how can you revise to create a better balance? You may find, wow, I never really noticed I did this with this paper, but it's mostly just numbers and stats in this middle section. It's a very dry section. Well, what are some stories? What are some narratives that I can weave in and kind of breathe life into this middle section for my readers? Or the opposite might be true. I went on and on with this narrative here in the middle, but I really don't have any numbers to back up the point I'm trying to make, or I don't have any outside quotes from credible experts. How do I balance this middle section out? So that's the important thing, is don't think of all of these appeals, okay, hit it, this one here, this one here. It's more like you're weaving them together throughout the paper in a balanced way. So hopefully now you have a better sense of these three appeals, ethos, logos, pathos, and you can go back to this presentation as needed, and the important thing is to just remember what they are and, more importantly, how you plan to employ them as you begin your writing and get deeper into the process. Good luck, everybody, and please let me know if you have any questions.